The Marvel Snap dev video on the upcoming Zombies season dropped early, which means my video reviewing the upcoming Zombies season is dropping right now. We'll start with the season pass card, Zombie Scarlet Witch, a 3/2 with an ability that says when you play a card here, Horde 2. Now, this is introducing a brand new gameplay mechanic called Horde. It is very reminiscent of the Amass mechanic from Magic the Gathering. The way it works is when you do not have a Horde, your first Horde trigger will create a 0/0 token and give it power. In this case, 2 power. If you do have a Horde already, additional Horde triggers will make that first Horde larger and larger and larger. If you are somehow able to get multiple Hordes, Hordes will trigger, to the best of my knowledge, on both of the Hordes, but it should be quite difficult to do that without going through a lot of extra hoops. In other words, Zombie Scarlet Witch, when you zoom out enough, is actually just a 3-cost version of Old Angela. Now, people I think will remember a lot about what Old Angela was able to represent at 2/0 plus 2, just simply the most points available at 2 cost. Moving a card like that up to 3 cost and making it a little bit different, notably the Horde spawns at a different location from the one Zombie Scarlet Witch is played at, which is good because it means she won't be clogging up her own slots that you need to play on in order to get her value with a Horde, but also it does mean that you don't have control over where the Horde spawns exactly, and that can be really impactful. This is a card that at 3 cost has a lot of competition. Now, I do think that it'll end up being a pretty solid build-around card, but part of me wonders if it's not maybe just a point of power low. At 3/3, I feel like this is a card I would call kind of a slam dunk good points card. At 3/2, I'm a little bit more worried about that. And I also think that there's just kind of a lot that we've seen. I mean, we just saw Viv Vision, which can really generate a ton of points, go really kind of unplayed at 3/3 and 3/2, and obviously her power matters more to her efficacy than this card's power matters to its efficacy, but it still matters a decent amount what you're getting out of this when you draw it late, and the fact that you're getting very little out of it does stick out. This is a card that seems to have inbuilt synergy with Kitty Pryde and sort of Hope Summersy Kitty Pryde decks. That kind of stuff sticks out as like that is where the zombie decks will want to go very early. There are other zombie support cards in the season, of course, and it looks like, and I do think you have to give Second Dinner credit for this, that they put a lot of effort into making sure that having an archetype in this season was not something that would make or break the entire season. The way they've set this up is there is Zombie Scarlet Witch on the season pass, there is Zombie Mr. Fantastic who plays with Horde cards in the Series 5 packs, and then at Series 4, direct to Series 4, is Zombie Giant Man, with a couple additional Horde-related cards coming in Sanctum Showdown and Grand Arena this month. What that means is, unlike in the Fantastic Four season, it's not that these cards are waiting around the entire time to get the big enabler that you're going to get at the end of the season. You're actually getting a lot of your enablers pretty early on, and that's allowing you to put these decks together much earlier in the season and get a sense of what they're like without having to invest a bunch of Series 5 packs into them. So I do think that's a good innovation on their part, because this season is not just about the Horde cards, it's about zombies generally, such as Colonel America, a 3/3 with an ongoing ability that gives cards at his location +1 power for each turn you've discarded a card. In other words, if somehow you are able to discard a card every turn of the game, this guy is going to be 21 additional power on a full lane. I think at baseline, when I look at this guy, I see this is a card that has a lot of potential, but it's also not a card I want to be my 1A game plan. Because it's going through so much effort to get all those points, I don't want it to be the only thing my deck is about. It needs to be the plan B/soft enabler or soft payoff to a deck that is doing something much, much larger. Now, I don't know exactly what that deck looks like. This is one of the cards that has given me the most fits when I'm trying to evaluate it in a vacuum. Largely, when I look at it, I see a card that makes a lot of really good numbers if you are able to free roll the requirements. And I'm not sure you always are, but some sort of like Strong Guy Swarm Zoo deck would want this. The problem is that's just not been a good deck traditionally, And since you're relying on this card's ability so specifically, it's quite vulnerable to any kind of tech like Cosmic Ghost Rider or Lady Deathstrike that can just make the whole thing go away. That's to say nothing of Enchantress. So when I look at this card, I see a card that has the ability to be a very overstated card, but is effectively gated on that by the fact that it's hard to get into a deck, and that I can't really picture what I'm supposed to be doing with this card. This is a card that has a pretty high margin of error, I suspect, because this is the kind of card where I believe they could have missed something. I just don't know that they have, because I think that this card provides a lot of power, but I think it's hard for a deck that wants to play this card to feel confident in it as plan A, which means if something does come up, it's going to be like this in a deck that already discards like 3 or 4 times a game. If there's a deck like that, then this card starts making a lot more sense. But I still do think fundamentally it is a lot like the other discard payoffs in the sense that it is generally quite vulnerable to various forms of tech. Oh no, I got Lady Deathstruck, just like Dracula, right? I got Enchantress, just like Morbius. It's just another one of those cards to me. Headpool is a 1/1 with an ability that says when it is destroyed, return it to your hand and then give your hand +1 power. I think this is a pretty solid card. There are some interesting ordering things with actual Deadpool here, but generally getting early power onto a Deadpool can be pretty valuable, which means this card is, once again, a card that is in that sort of Deadpool X23 space, and I think that's the kind of stuff that really helps Destroy become a more consistent deck. When Destroy first became like an actual deck, it was after the release of X23 because it got a second thing that was able to actually functionally allow it to work when it was on a draw that didn't have a Deadpool. And I think this card could be in a similar space. Destroy has an inbuilt, like, high variance game plan because when you do get the Deadpool itself, you start doing things that are very, very stupid. When you get the X23, you get access to a couple of other things. I personally am not sure if this will end up being the best thing for Destroy, but I do think that it is the kind of consistency upgrade that you can see a lot of benefit from when you have decks that are generally dependent on having good targets to destroy. But in a fallback situation, just any targets to destroy matters a lot, and it especially matters a lot that they cost less than 3. There's a reason Sabretooth is so rarely played. The cheaper the destroy cards that you get payoff from are, the happier you are to just throw them in your deck and weave them into your curve. Oh, look at all this space I have in my curve. Boom, I play this and a Venom on 4. Is it the greatest thing you could ever do? No, but it's better than not playing a card with that Venom. And that's kind of where this gets an upgrade. Zombie Giant Man is going direct to Series 4 packs at the beginning of the season, which I think is just awesome. It's great that this card comes out at the same time as Zombie Scarlet Witch. That means a ton for this deck, I think. And it means that we'll be able to actually experiment with the bare bones of the zombie archetype, no pun intended, when the season drops immediately. Now, Zombie Giant Man is sort of the payoff for this whole archetype. However big your Horde is, he gets that big. He also Hordes one himself. He gains the power of the Horde. He's effectively Taskmaster, but just for the Horde. Now, downsides are that the thing that he's targeting is very face up on the board. Something like a Shadow King can make you feel stupid. A Shang-Chi can make you feel stupid. There's plenty of stuff, I think, that can make you feel stupid for investing in this guy, but he is pretty large. My instinct is that if they wanted this to be like a seriously competitive archetype, this guy would cost a little bit less. I think at 4 costs, suddenly this guy is really, really threatening. At 5 costs, he ends up looking a little bit middling to me, but he is going to be quite big. I think largely if he ends up too weak, it is bad for the archetype as a whole. So if they have like buff targets, potential buff targets in the season, this card and Zombie Scarlet Witch are the ones that I'm looking at. Because when you make a card or a mechanic built around zombies, you kind of just sort of limit yourself to actually being able to add more cards to this deck. Now, one thing that I think they did that was pretty clever is a lot of these zombie cards seem to really tie into the Kitty Pryde archetype. So they will be able to, when they make a new card, good card for a Kitty Pryde archetype, make this deck a little bit better. I think that is like a legitimate thing that will probably happen, but they have to make sure that this stuff is the best version of the Kitty Pryde archetype for that to ever actually matter. And this guy strikes me as maybe 1 energy too expensive for regular use. I do like the idea of him a very large amount, but I find it hard to believe that, like, I realize he's big and awesome, but like I could be playing Juggernaut, right? Like that's who he's competing with as the top end for a deck like this. And it's like, oh, I probably would rather actually be Juggernauting, wouldn't I? Another bit of clever usage of Series 4 here for these sort of tied together packages. Zombie Power Man very clearly pairs with Zombie Captain America, or I should say Colonel America. And that is because what this card is doing is making sure you're getting a discard every turn. I don't know if you're going to be able to set this up, but this guy, 2/4, wins his lane, discards something, play Captain America, Colonel America, on him, and then you're just going to sort of repeatedly always be doing that. If there's a deck that actually wants that to happen, it does seem like a very powerful thing to do. I'm not going to lie. That just seems like if you can like make sure that there's a swarm on the left side of your hand and keep making there be a swarm on the left side of your hand, which I think is the actual problem with a deck like this, like there are some interesting things that can happen here. The problem is it's fully out of your control. It's not a you may choose to do this. It's if you mess this up and you end up discarding something that actually matters, it can cost you the game. This is a Series 4 card. The idea of this and Colonel America is the kind of thing that is appealing to me, but you need to figure out what deck is actually able to use it. Maybe there's a deck that's just like fully the cards that are benefiting from getting discarded, and then those cards, and you're playing some sort of like generally mid-rangey type of thing. That seems possible, but giving up on what makes mid-range, which is to say the ability to run tech cards to beat the decks that go over the top of it, I don't know if that's what you want to be doing. Zombie Mr. Fantastic might be the most important Horde card of the entire season. Effectively starting at a 2/4 base, a 2/2 with Horde 2 on it, but also an activate ability that gives 4 created cards on the board. Note that the Horde is a created card, +1 power. So this guy is just a bundle of stats. He is so many stats. But there's a specific interaction here that he ties into, which is Mysterio. Oh, you need some created cards? Well, good news for you. Mysterio is 3 of them. The Horde is 1. And I think this is the thing that, if it is good enough, will allow these Horde decks to hook in to the Kitty Pryde archetype that I have so often referred to as the Cook. The Hope Summers, Mysterio, Gwenpool, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like that deck, that is the thing that I think is most likely to become a Horde deck. And this overlap with Mysterio specifically is really, really useful. Of course, with the stats that this guy is putting out there, he could also end up being a very solid V-hand card. This is not a card that you're actually all that sad to see Friggaing, right? Like this is not as good as V-hand. No, you'd much rather Frigga the V-hand, but you're very happy to Frigga this. This is a very reasonable Frigga target. You get enough cards down. It's like a soft, worse V-hand, and that is notable to me as well. So the very specific thing that I like about this is it puts these decks firmly in contention for the Kitty Pryde stuff. And to me, if I'm the dev team, what I do is when I leave this season, I want to make sure that the best way to play Kitty Pryde, Gwenpool, Mysterio is with zombies. Because that's what gives this deck the ability to have longevity. Because otherwise, if it's not going to be the best at doing anything, it doesn't need to be the best deck in the game, but it needs to be the best in a package, right? Then you get to feel good about what you've done here. Because even though they did a lot of mitigation in terms of what cards go where and how much is this season reliant on Horde actually being good to make it feel like it mattered, I do think that they still need Horde to be good enough to be played, and that would be the direction I would go in here. So I'm really impressed with the way they've gone about this. This is the card that comes out in the second week. So by the second week of the season, October 14th, we should be able to play not a full-powered version of a zombie deck, but I think we'll have like 80 to 90% of the cards that we'll be running most of the time. We might even have 100% of them. I think it's very possible that zombie decks are just this card, Giant Man, and Zombie Scarlet Witch, or maybe not even the Giant Man. Maybe we're just free rolling these cards because they're the ones that have good value on them. Zombie Mr. Fantastic and Zombie Scarlet Witch in a sort of Kitty Pryde Mysterio Gwenpool shell. That's what I'm excited to do with this card when it comes out. Back to the zombies that are not a part of the Horde deck. Zombie Captain Marvel is a card that I think is really going to put to the test how bad 4-cost activates are. Because when I look at this, I see the strongest standalone 4-cost activate we've ever had. This says activate, destroy your other cards here, get +3 power for each of them. So like obviously a destroy card, but also like Nimrod seems extremely powerful. And oh, by the way, there's a second piece of this text, which is move to a location you're losing. That is absolutely beast mode stuff. I might be way off base here, but I think this card is legitimately just going to be a powerful thing to do. Like, I will want to go out of my way to play this with like the Wolverine family of cards, because I think that that is just such a powerful thing to do, to have this stuff moving around. And it's notably the kind of thing that you get full control over. Like, yes, it does suck when you draw this late or when it's not destroying things that you actually care about, but like just some sort of like mid-rangey Mysterio deck, even just like, oh, I'm filling up some crap in here. Like, there is stuff that makes sense to me. What I don't know is that final bit. Move to a location you're losing is not the same as Captain Marvel's actual text. So if you need her to stay where she is, that might be a problem. Like, if you're like, I don't know. I don't actually know. Like, it does seem like a very interesting card, but I think there's going to be like a fair bit of like, oh, that's not what I expected to happen when this card drops, because people are going to expect it to have text similar to actual Captain Marvel. They're not going to read it that closely. And what it actually says is a little bit different. And I think that is largely the issue, that if there is an issue with this card, it has, which is like, if it had just like Captain Marvel text, you know, gain end of the game, move to a location that'll win you the game, I think this card would just be straight up awesome. It doesn't have that, and so that is a little bit of an issue. I think if there is an issue, there are issues about it being a 4-cost activate. We've seen bad versions of those before, but I think just like on baseline, the thing I'm actually the most worried about is that stuff. Like, that is a legitimate potential issue here. I do think that there are some really strong things that this card can do, though. Like, I think that at the very least, it's going to be a very satisfying card to play, win rate agnostic. It's going to be doing cool stuff whenever it gets to do stuff. The other cool thing that they did with the Horde archetype was sprinkle its cards into the game modes. There are 2 game modes this month, Sanctum Showdown and Grand Arena. I believe Sanctum Showdown is scheduled to go on first, and it is the one that will provide the hunger. I'm not really seeing a lot from the hunger, although I do think that if you are fully invested in Zombie Giant Man, remember how I talked about how we might just be playing things that are just like, oh, I'm going to play just ZSW and just ZMF, and then I won't have to like do any of the other Horde stuff. I think once you start playing Zombie Giant Man, you start being a lot more interested in just the hunger, which is just effectively a 1/3, but when you play Giant Man, it ends up being a 1/6 because it's doubled in terms of impact because it goes onto the Giant Man. My worry is that Giant Man isn't going to be enough to justify himself, so I find it hard to believe that he's going to be enough to justify this as well. I definitely do think that the way I expect to play these cards is going to be ZSW, ZMF, Mysterio, Gwen, Kitty, that kind of pile, right? That's what I expect. And in that pile, I would much rather play a Juggernaut than a giant guy. But I don't expect playing a giant guy to be wrong. And this is a spell, which means it's really, really good to play with Zombie Scarlet Witch. Like that kind of stuff where you get like, oh, this is like +5 just from putting this on my Zombie Scarlet Witch onto the Horde. That's sick as hell. Like there's really not a way around that. It is super cool and super awesome and super dope. And so I think that this is the kind of card that's like sneaky interesting. It'll only ever do stuff in this archetype. It's sort of like the zero of this deck, right? Like no deck plays zero except for Sauron decks. And it's not the #1 guy. It's not the thing those decks are about. That's why they're called Sauron decks or Nightmare decks. They're not called zero decks. But he's in basically all of them. And so I think that it is entirely possible that this card takes a similar role if the package ends up being worth running and people are doing more than just playing 3-cost Angela and a 2/8 in the form of Zombie Mr. Fantastic in their already reasonable mid-range decks. Another card that seems to push the Horde archetype closer to Kitty Pryde is Zombie Sentry, which checks the right location and gives the Horde +1 for each of your cards at that location. So that means that this is a card that really wants you to be like filling up the right location with Kitty Prydes and whatnot, and then you reveal this as well. You get +4 on the Horde, then you end up clearing up your location there because it's Kitty Prydes and face down spells or whatever, right? And so that's what this card is looking for. And at a 3/8, that's not bad value. It sort of ranges from 3/4 to 3/8 though, because like the one thing about the Horde that sticks out to me is like, since you don't control where it is, things can be quite bad. Like you can put your cards that make a Horde at a location that prevents it from being at that location. But stuff like, for example, Crimson Cosmos randomly showing up is going to be really bad for a deck like this. And so I think that largely this kind of stuff is going to be secondary, tertiary. If the Horde stuff is good enough, I can see this card like actually being like the kind of thing that gets nerf targeted here, because it's just not all that interesting. It's the kind of thing where it's like, if the Horde deck is good, you knock a power off of it by taking a power off of this, because if the Horde deck is not good, people are going to be hybridizing it a lot more with the way I talked about with ZMF and ZSW already. But if like people are playing a lot of Zombie Giant, man, this guy really does want you to do that. He is from Grand Arena. So in total, the Horde deck is basically 1 Series 4 card, 2 cards from game modes, 1 Series 5/Season Pass card, and 1 Series 5 Snap Pack card. Those are the cards that interact with Horde, and I think that's a really interesting way to take advantage of the new methods of distribution of cards that they have here. Perhaps the weirdest card in the season is the last one, Zombie Galacti. Apparently that's how you pronounce it. I would have thought it was Galacti. This is a card that has a bunch of unprecedented text. First, 7 cost, 4 power. Not great. Second, game start, choose 6 other cards in your deck. It chooses 6 cards at the beginning of the game. There is, or there appears to be, an aura around them based on the dev video. On reveal, transform those cards into copies of this. So what you're trying to do here is get to 7 energy. Obviously, you know, magic is a way to do this. Buff this card, and then turn your whole board into whatever the buffed version of this card is. Now, to me, that sounds a little bit too much. It's asking too much. But there is a card that I think can shortcut a lot of this, and that card is Khonshu. So imagine, if you will, a discard deck built basically so that nothing other than this can ever realistically enter the discard pile. Get Khonshu up to 12, you have a Lady Sif that gets rid of this, Khonshu brings back this, it transforms everything that was marked by it at the beginning of the game into 12 power dudes. You're probably not losing the game if you just like effectively have one-sided Gamma Lab. It does seem like the kind of thing that's interesting to me. Outside of that, I don't even want to know what this deck is supposed to look like if you're building it like without cheating, right? Like if you're just like actually playing like Magic and Ramp cards and Shuri and whatnot, I'm out. Just play Nimrod instead. If I wanted a bunch of guys that were going to have 12 power, I'd be playing Nimrod instead. I don't really care. This card is a Khonshu card. I'm marking it now. If anything makes this card functional, it is going to be that. Now, to be clear, I really think it would probably be bad if this card was functional, because this is a very Hela type card. And the deck I'm talking about is not a deck I'm excited to see, but it is worth noting that it does get completely obliterated by Stardust. So I do think it's entirely possible that this card ends up being Hela too. Oh, look, it's another deck that does 1,000,000 points late in the game with a thing that brings back from the graveyard and loses to Stardust. Entirely possible, if you ask me. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for bearing with me. As always, I've been KMBest. You have been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one. Remember, let me know in the comments what you think about this upcoming season. I still read them all. Have a wonderful evening.